You think you can sit there and lecture me about corporate responsibility while your network takes millions from pharmaceutical companies? Elon's voice cut through the studio air like a blade, his eyes fixed on Stephen with unmistakable contempt. The interview had started normally enough, with Stephen's typical comedic jabs about space travel and electric cars. But something shifted when Stephen brought up recent controversies surrounding worker conditions at Tesla factories. What should have been lighthearted banter quickly transformed into something far more serious. Stephen leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Well, Elon, when you're paying people minimum wage to build rockets while you're worth $200 billion, some people might call that a little hypocritical. Hypocritical? Elon's laugh was sharp and humorless. You want to talk about hypocrisy? Your show pretends to be about truth and justice, but you're nothing more than a corporate puppet dancing for your advertisers. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the playful back and forth they had expected. Stephen's producer gestured frantically from behind the cameras, but Stephen ignored him completely. At least I'm honest about what I do, Stephen shot back, his voice taking on an edge that viewers rarely heard. I don't pretend to be saving humanity while treating my employees like disposable parts in a machine. Elon's jaw tightened visibly. Those employees you're so concerned about? They're building the future. They're part of something bigger than your pathetic little comedy show that makes jokes while the world burns around us. Oh, spare me the savior complex, Stephen interrupted, leaning forward aggressively. You're not some visionary prophet. You're a rich kid who bought his way into every company he's ever been associated with. PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX. You didn't build any of it from scratch. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Elon's hands gripped the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. For a moment, the only sound in the studio was the quiet hum of the cameras still rolling. That's rich coming from someone who built his entire career making fun of people better than him, Elon said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. At least when I fail, I'm trying to do something that matters. When you fail, it's just another bad joke that nobody remembers. Stephen's facade of professional composure finally cracked completely. You want to know what nobody remembers? Your promises. Mars colonies by 2024, fully autonomous cars by 2020, Hyperloop transportation revolutionizing travel. You're nothing but empty promises wrapped in a shiny tech package. Elon stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward with unexpected force. The sudden movement sent a shock through the studio audience, who had never witnessed such raw hostility on what was supposed to be an entertainment show. Stephen remained seated, but his posture had changed from relaxed confidence to defensive alertness. You know what your real problem is, Stephen? Elon's voice rose as he began pacing behind his chair. You've spent so many years hiding behind jokes and scripted bits that you've forgotten how to have a real conversation with another human being. Stephen's eyes followed Elon's movement with calculated precision. Sit down, Elon. You're making a fool of yourself on national television. A fool? Elon spun around to face him directly. You want to talk about making a fool of yourself? Let's talk about your little arrangement with the pharmaceutical lobby. How much did they pay your network to keep quiet about vaccine side effects during the pandemic? The accusation hit the studio like a thunderbolt. Several audience members gasped audibly, and Stephen's face went pale beneath the studio makeup. The producer in the background was now frantically speaking into his headset, clearly trying to decide whether to cut to commercial. That's a serious accusation you're making, Stephen said slowly, his voice taking on a warning tone. One that could get you into a lot of legal trouble. Legal trouble? Elon laughed bitterly. You think I'm afraid of lawyers? I've been fighting lawsuits from people like you for decades. The difference is, I have nothing to hide. Stephen rose from his chair now, matching Elon's standing position. Nothing to hide? You've been investigated by more government agencies than I can count. Labor violations, securities fraud, environmental violations. Should I keep going? Keep going, Elon challenged, stepping closer to Stephen's desk. Because every investigation you mentioned was started by people who were threatened by what I was building. People who wanted to keep the world exactly the way it was because it made them rich and comfortable. The tension between them was now so thick it seemed to physically fill the space. Stephen moved around his desk, closing the distance between himself and Elon until they were standing less than 3 feet apart. You know what I think? Stephen's voice dropped to match Elon's earlier whisper. I think you came on this show tonight looking for a fight because your latest project is failing and you need a distraction. What happened next would be analyzed by media critics for months afterward. Rather than escalating further into personal attacks, Elon suddenly stopped, his expression shifting from anger to something approaching pity. The change was so unexpected that Stephen actually took a step backward, momentarily thrown off balance by the shift in energy. You really don't understand, do you? Elon said quietly, his voice now carrying a weight that seemed to press down on everyone in the room. This isn't about me needing a distraction. This is about you being exactly what's wrong with journalism today. Stephen opened his mouth to respond, but Elon continued without pause. For 30 years, I've watched shows like yours turn serious issues into punchlines. Climate change becomes a joke about politicians. Economic inequality becomes material for comedy bits. Meanwhile, real problems get worse because nobody wants to have uncomfortable conversations. The studio audience had gone completely silent now, sensing they were witnessing something far removed from typical television entertainment. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether they should continue recording or look away from what felt like a private moment of revelation. You had a chance tonight to actually discuss solutions, Elon continued, his tone becoming more measured but no less intense. Instead, you chose to attack me personally because that's easier than admitting your entire industry has become irrelevant. Stephen's face flushed red, his composure cracking further. Irrelevant? We reach millions of people every night. We influence elections. We shape public opinion. We hold powerful people accountable. No, Elon said firmly, reaching down to remove his microphone. You entertain people while they ignore the world falling apart around them. You make them feel smart for laughing at problems instead of solving them. The sound of the microphone hitting Stephen's desk echoed through the studio with surprising finality. Elon straightened his jacket and looked directly into the main camera for the first time since the interview began. To anyone watching this who actually wants to build something instead of just complaining about everything, you know where to find me. He turned back to Stephen one final time. And to you, Stephen, when your ratings drop and your advertisers leave, remember this conversation. Because while you were making jokes, some of us were actually trying to save the world. Without another word, Elon walked off the set, leaving Stephen standing alone beside his desk, speechless for perhaps the first time in his career. The studio remained eerily quiet until a single audience member began clapping, then another, until nearly half the audience was applauding as Elon disappeared through the backstage entrance. Stephen stood there for several more seconds, clearly struggling to regain his professional composure, before finally addressing the camera with a forced smile that fooled no one. Well, folks, I guess we'll be right back after this commercial break. But everyone knew the real show was already over.